Have you ever really stopped to think that your words, just words, could actually land you in prison? I'm not talking about threats or telling people to do something dangerous. I mean, just for the ideas they represent? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at the strange case of Dr. Chen-Jing Yuan, a scholar whose online posts ended up putting language itself on trial.
It all kind of circles back to this one powerful idea from the philosopher J.L. Austin. He said, to say is to do. What he meant was, when we speak, we're not just, describing what's around us. We're actually doing things. Our words have real power. They can make a promise, declare a fact, or even give a command.
But where's the line? When does just saying something turn into a crime? That's the huge question at the center of this story. See, Dr. Chen-Jing Yuan, a scholar, a guy with a PhD, was sentenced to 20 months in prison just for sharing some posts online. The court said his words crossed that line. So how on earth do you build a criminal case out of a few words on a screen? Let's dive in.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, we have to start with the official charges. Let's look at exactly how the prosecution took his online activity and framed it as a serious crime.
Okay, so the first piece of the puzzle right from the indictment is this. The prosecution said that for a few years, Dr. Chen was getting online and spreading what they called false information. Simple as that.
But here's where it gets really serious. They didn't just say he was spreading misinformation. They argued that these posts weren't harmless at all. In fact, they claimed his posts caused severe public chaos. And that phrase, severe public chaos, that's the key, the legal trigger for this kind of crime.
So when you look at it, the prosecution's whole case really boils down to three simple steps. 1. The act. He spread false info. 2. The consequence. That info caused major chaos. And 3. The intent. He did it on purpose or knowingly. They had to prove all three of those things to get a conviction. It's like a three-legged stool. Take one away and the whole thing falls apart.
Okay, so that's the prosecution's story. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side. A really detailed legal analysis of this case came out, and it basically goes point by point, taking apart each one of those three arguments.
First up, they challenged that whole idea of severe chaos. The legal analysis basically says, hold on a second. The prosecution just states there was chaos. It's a conclusion. But they never give any actual evidence, no description of when this chaos happened or where or what it even looked like. It's just an accusation with nothing to back it up.
And then the defense comes in with this really powerful real-world gut check. They point out that even after the trial, the exact same posts, the ones used as criminal evidence, they're still online. Nobody's taken them down. And guess what? They haven't gone viral, nobody's panicking, there's been zero reaction. This simple fact just completely pulls the rug out from under the claim that these posts were ever dangerous enough to cause severe chaos.
All right, next they take on the big one, false information. The defense argues that the court made a huge mistake here. They basically threw all of Dr. Chen's posts into one big bucket labeled false info. But legally, that term is really specific. It has to be a statement of fact that you can actually prove is false. And the thing is, most of his posts just weren't that.
And to prove it, they broke the posts down into 4 different types. You had stuff like art, cartoons, for example. I mean, a cartoon is a metaphor, right? It's not a factual statement. Then there were posts that were just him expressing an emotion, totally subjective. A lot of them were just his opinions, which by definition aren't facts. Only a tiny fraction were even close to being objective statements, and even for those, nobody ever proved they were actually false.
So that brings us to the last pillar, his intent. How did the court prove he knew what he was doing was wrong? Well, this part is pretty wild. Get this. Their argument was that because he has a PhD, because he's highly educated, he should have known better. And because he should have known better, they concluded he must have had malicious intent.
Yeah, you can imagine what legal experts thought of that. They slammed this logic, calling it an identity-based presumption of guilt. Think about that. Instead of innocent until proven guilty, the court used his identity, the fact that he's a scholar, against him. They basically argued his education made him more guilty from the start. The legal analysis called this idea extremely absurd and dangerous, and you can see why.
So we've seen the legal arguments back and forth, but to really get to the heart of what's going on here, we need to zoom out a little and go back to that philosophical idea we started with, J.L. Austin's speech act theory.
So just to refresh, speech act theory is this idea that words aren't just for talking about things, they actually do things. You know, when a judge says, "I sentence you," They aren't just describing a sentence, their words are the thing that makes it happen. The words themselves are the action.
Okay, so Austin breaks any speech act down into 3 parts. And when you apply it to this case, it gets really clear. First, you have the locutionary act. That's just the literal words being said. For Dr. Chen, that was just forwarding posts. Simple. Then there's the illocutionary act. That's the intention behind the words. Here, the court just assumed his intention was to create chaos. And finally, you have the perlocutionary act. That's the actual effect the words had on people. And as we've already seen, there was no actual chaos. So the whole argument is that the court made a massive category mistake. They mixed up the simple act of posting something with an unproven intention and a non-existent effect.
So, where does all this leave us? I mean, what does it all really mean? This case, it's about so much more than just one man's prison sentence. It's really a story about the deep connection between language, power, and our very idea of justice.
One of the philosophical analyses puts it perfectly. Normally, words mean what they mean because we as a community all kind of agree on it. But in this case, you had a legal authority just step in and say, nope, we are going to decide what his words meant and what his intention was, completely ignoring how language actually works in the real world.
And really, that's the core battle here, isn't it? It's a clash between 2 completely different logics. On one side, you have the idea that words get their meaning from context, from what we intend, and from the effect they have, how they're actually used. And on the other side, you have a totally different logic. That meaning is whatever the people in power decide it is.
Which leaves us with one last, and I think really critical question. If someone's freedom hangs on the definition of a single word, words like chaos, or false, or knowingly, then the power to define those words is the power to create justice. So the question is, who gets to be the dictionary? Thanks so much for joining me.